Hello, beautiful women of the Goddess Temple. I'm Ashley Sunshine, and I felt inspired today to come in with teachings around the goddess. Um, this is something that's been so powerful in my life for many years now, and it's part of the reason why we even created the Goddess Moon Temple. And really, we're feeling the divine feminine whisper within our being. We're feeling her awaken within us and remember where we come from, who we truly are, and what we're meant to do here in this lifetime. And it's so exciting to be in this lifetime where we get to remember the goddess and embody her in our day-to-day and bring her wisdom and teachings back without the fear of persecution holding us back. So I'm going to create a series here in this group to dive into some of the mythology, some of the stories, and the history, the her story behind the divine feminine. And it's really sad what has happened in our history, that the history books and the Bible even have been written largely by men with an agenda, and much of the history of our planet, of our people, of humanity was wiped out of the history books. And so we're here to remember the divine feminine in our lineage, remember the lineage of love that each of us carry in our bones, in our blood, in our DNA, in our hearts. And so I'm really excited to share with you just some of the history that I'm picking up. And now I have a bunch of resources. Today I'm going to use this book, The Stones of the Goddess, as a source to share with you a bit about the ancient history and the first inklings of the goddess that we found in archaeological digs and all of that stuff. But, of course, history and herstory are, it's never clear exactly what happened, right? Because many of the books were tampered with. Many of the the books were lost, the records were changed, and a lot of it also was from word of mouth. So I invite you to do your own research. I invite you to dive into many books, and if you want to get started, I can also recommend you a few books. I'll actually drop some resources in the comments of this video that if you're excited and interested about diving into the goddess and the story that we carry of the divine feminine in our bones. It's time. It's time to remember. It's time to awaken. And I am a coach. I'm a teacher of yoga and a coach of women in business mostly. And I help women connect their divine feminine and let the feminine lead their life, and then bridge that with the masculine so that we can create amazing empires, and that we can change our planet through our work in the world. And what I'm realizing through what I've been doing is that I'm actually training priestesses. I'm helping us remember our role here as priestess, as grid work, and that it's not just a fun lifestyle, it's not just a cool title we get to give ourselves, but that actually doing priestess work is a lineage and is a serious undertaking that we carry. And that back in the days when temples were the center of our society, the priestesses would be the high council. We would be the conflict resolution. We would help decide on big decisions in terms of government and managing people in the way that... So this role that we're stepping into to recognize the goddess within us and step into our role as stewards of heaven on earth, it's a big deal. And it's a beautiful time in history in herstory, where it's welcome and it's being called from us, and we can be paid well for it. And wealth in the hands of women was normal back in the day before the patriarchy started in the start of agriculture. But before that, societies were largely matriarchal and the money was in the hands of the women. So anyway, that's like not even the beginning. So the beginning, let's go there. And if you're joining me and you want to get cozy for the next 20 minutes or so and just tune in, I'd love to have you. If you want to light a candle or, put some incense or just put essential oil on you, or if you're just hanging out on the bus, that's also amazing. So what is so cool is that one of the very first art that we have found in the history of our world, it was images of the goddess, and it is called the Venus of Willendorf, right? And that is this, I'm sure you have all seen this image of the goddess. And this was the very first piece of art as a sculpture that we found. And they said that it was around 30,000 years ago, but there's also depictions of the goddess that were found from up to 500,000 years ago. And I want to remind us that humans have been around for 2.5 million years. 2.5 million years. If you think about that, that is a long time. And we count history as the last 5,000 years, and then before that is prehistory, right? It's we kind of discount everything that happened before 5 or 10,000 years ago and say that it's primitive. But we have to recognize that actually 99% of the history of humanity was prehistory. So we are being called to remember what those times were like. We're being called to recognize our ancestors' connection to the earth, their connection to the divine feminine, their connection to the goddess, and to adopt some of those ways, because those 2 million years, those 2.5 million years, they were not destroying the earth, right? And only in the last few hundred years have we began to have destruction on this planet. So a representation of the goddess in the form of triangular figures which were adorned with breasts and or a vulva, and sometimes a head and a face, were found 500,000 years ago. 500,000 years ago, someone carved a woman in a figure. And maybe back then they didn't understand that we needed a man and a woman to create life. And so they saw the woman as this miracle worker that could birth a baby from nowhere, from her body. And they saw that as the most miraculous and magical thing that we could ever imagine. And just feel into how different that is to the way our hospitals and the sick houses, Bet Cholim, right, will deal with pregnancy and birth. It's like night and day. It's like, imagine witnessing the most incredible miracle that you could ever imagine coming out of a vagina. And think about how much you would revere the vagina as a holy cave, as a holy vessel. And through these depictions of the goddess that are found from 500,000 years ago, we can see that they did recognize the holiness of the woman and the goddess. And so we find, and there's this beautiful depiction that I want to share with you. It's called the Goddess Timeline. I forget the name of the woman, but I will share with you her website, that she created this beautiful timeline of goddesses throughout history. And it starts 30,000 years ago, where we found the images of the Venus, the Willendorf Venus, in ancient Austria, ancient France, Czechoslovakia, and Germany. And it's interesting because all across these regions, the images looked the same. And as the timeline goes on, you see that these images of the goddess are found throughout the entire planet. From, Europe, and also in South America, and also in Asia, and also in Africa. And these images of the goddess are very, very similar. And that leads us to believe, and if you look at this timeline, which I'm going to share the image on the comments right now, so that if you are following along, you can click on it and see this beautiful graphic that she made. In order to get it in high quality, I think you need to buy it, but you can at least see the evolution of the goddess over the millennia of our earth. And you can see that in different regions throughout the world, the images of the goddesses are similar. And even the sound of the names that they give to the goddesses are similar. Like Isis, Osset, Ishtar, Inanna, Nana, Nuit, Nut, Anat, Ashira, Astarte, Atar, Hathor. They all sound very similar, even though they're all from totally different parts of the world. And back then, we know they didn't have the internet, they didn't have flights, so they couldn't like talk to each other, right? So it goes to show that in the pure being in nature and the living with the land and the living in tribes, we couldn't help but ask questions about the divine. We couldn't help but wonder, how did we get here, and what are these forces that are keeping us alive? And as people opened up to those questions, which so many of us in the modern day are too distracted to even ask those questions, and everything is so taken care of for us that we don't even feel the need necessarily to ask those questions. But when we open to those questions, we open to spirit. We open to divine guidance. And that divine guidance comes through. And it came through for hundreds of thousands of years, if not more, through the voice of the goddess, through the voice of the divine feminine. And we can see that through the names that they gave and through the images that they created in their art. And it's just wild to me that we don't learn in history class that like everyone across the entire world for tens of thousands of years or hundreds of thousands of years was carving the goddess. And imagine what you might feel about your body being a woman if you had known that. And if you were able to see some of these images of the big bellies and the big breasts and the big vulvas that they carved in these images, like you wouldn't maybe feel the pressure to like be skinny or be beautiful for men, right? You would feel kind of just an innate magic in your being. And it's also so common that these cultures throughout history, especially through Europe and Africa, that I forgot what I was going to say. I got too excited. So we find that these images they're connected to Mother Earth. That's what I wanted to say. And so they found these images in different places, such as caves, rivers, and slightly different symbolisms would be in different places. And so they revered the cave as similar to the vagina. They revered the river as similar to the the sexual fluids, right? And the spring was like the breast milk of the mother. And so these images were also you could make those connections and say, oh, they made those connections. They went to a spring, an ancient spring. Imagine, living somewhere and you're searching for water, and then all of a sudden you come across a spring that just has an infinite supply of water, and it just keeps on coming. Like, clearly you would think that was the goddess. You would connect to that through magic and say, wow, thank you, great mother. Thank you, great father. Thank you. And what's fascinating is that I think that people really revered the goddess because they didn't know the man's role in reproduction. So for them, like, the world was born through the woman. And so now we have the opportunity to take that and bridge it with the masculine and see that we're here to co-create, and that the masculine doesn't need to overpower us. The masculine doesn't need to erase these facts from our history, because we fully honor the masculine as well as we fully honor our own feminine. And I believe that it starts with that. So learning about these and looking at these goddesses and looking at this timeline, for me personally, it really helps me to recognize my own inherent magic and my own inherent beauty and my role here. So it starts with us, right? We look at this and then we remember that we are divine. We remember the role that we play in the creation story. And then through that self-recognition, through that self-remembrance, we can teach others how to recognize us. And so by looking at this history, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to create more videos like this to like walk you through. And right now we just stayed with like the ancient days, but I want to walk you all the way through to, you know, the time where Jesus was born, because that was like zero, you know, and that's when for many of us in the West, like time began for whatever reason. So I'm going to talk about that, and I actually do see the reason behind it. So I'm going to explain that more and talk about the feminine roles of, you know, the goddesses leading up to that, and then the Mother Marys, the Mary Magdalenes, this kind of thing, and then leading up from that point to our modern day and how we continue to relate to the goddess and how we use that whole herstory and reclaim the remembrance of where we came from. The ancient temple days, the witch burning days, right? And come into that divine power in our lives today, the self-recognition that is so needed by women today. And so what I see when I'm working with women is that one of the biggest things that we need is a process for self-recognition, to understand who we are, to recognize our lineage of love, to recognize our past lives and our ancestry in the temple days, to also recognize our ancestry in the creating harm, you know, on this planet, because we also come from that, and to come into a sense of forgiveness, but then also even deeper to recognize our own indigenous roots on this planet, no matter where you came from, no matter where your lineage is from. To recognize those ancestral roots so that you can claim and recognize who you are. And in that power, then step into your role, step into your desires in this lifetime. From that place of deep self-recognition. So I will come back with more on this. If you are interested and excited about this, I would love to hear and what kind of threads you want to bring into it. If there's anything I missed, if there's anything, you know, please let's weave the goddess herstory together in this group, and let's presence the goddess within us, who is worthy of our devotion, who is worthy of our love and remembrance and recognition. All right, my loves. Many blessings. Thank you for joining. See you later.